Good afternoon, Golden Key family. We welcome you to this new session on the second day of the Virtual Leadership Workshop by the Golden Key Mafikeng chapter. It has certainly been 2 wonderful days. We have been through so many awesome gatherings and webinars. We just want to welcome you, and while you sign in, we want to invite you in the chat function. Please put your name and surname and where you are logging in from. We're just going to give it a few minutes for everybody to sign in. So you are welcome to add your name and surname in the chat function and tell us where you are logging in from. This is our final session of the second day of the Golden Key Mafikeng chapter virtual leadership workshop. Hi, Chanel from Centurion, Alex from Georgia, Natasha from Centurion, welcome. We're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to log in. Our topic this afternoon is redefining leadership, leading during a pandemic. Good day, Lenzo from MP, from the village Marapine. Zanele Nguni from Mafikeng. Apologies if I mispronounce anything. We welcome you to this session. Gonna give it a few more minutes. Our speaker this evening is Marjorie Ngwenya, and she will be joining us soon. She's not logged on at the moment as she's been having a few difficulties, but we will see her in the session soon and draw from her experience. I want to hand over to Abril. Abril, you're welcome to read her bio for us in the interim, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jonita, and welcome to everyone. And as Jonita indicated, it's been an amazing 2 days. We've had amazing speakers come on and unpack to us the different topics that we've heard. And I think what they've really done is unpack these different concepts about leadership in a whole different way we did not expect. So about our keynote speaker today, her name is Marjorie Ngwenya. She's a coach and non-executive director and passionate about personal growth. Her experience includes conference speaking on diversity and inclusion, coaching leaders on self-leadership, working with organizations to embrace the benefits of cognitive diversity, coaching ethnic majority professionals on self-leadership in the corporate environment. She has often been a minority in the organizations she has worked within and the leadership teams she has served on. She's past president of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries and was the first president of the same Faculty of Actuaries to be based outside the United Kingdom, the third female and the first person of color. She was the founding director of the African Leadership University School of Insurance and industry-driven initiative to deepen insurance talent on the African continent. Her prior roles include being a member of the Group Executive Committee of Liberty Group in South Africa, playing the role of Chief Strategist and Chief Risk Officer of Old Mutual's African operations. Marjorie trained as an actuary and holder of a Sloan Masters of Leadership and Strategy from London Business School. So that's about our keynote speaker, Marjorie Ngwenya. So she'll be joining us in about 20 minutes time as she's still trying to sort out some few connection issues, but please be patient. Jonita, back to you.
Thank you, Abril. I think it would be a good idea for us in the interim, because of the valuable content that we have received. I mean, this has just been such a journey. It's almost like we don't want it to end. Let us discuss a few points that have stood out, as well as some of the aspects that came to the fore that actually united between the speakers. Are there any points that you would like to raise with regards to that?
Yeah, I would go on and talk about every session if I'm to be very honest, because that's the quality of what we've been given by our guest speakers. But of course, let me start off from where we began. The very first session from Prof. Mazwe on authentic leadership. I think for me, that is probably one of the areas that I believe we can look beyond this workshop or beyond this seminar to really focus on, because I think authentic leadership is, we don't give it too much attention, but it is one of those important topics because it helps us to really get to know ourselves, but at the same time, I think it really is the heart of what true leadership is. So yeah, for me, that session was quite remarkable on authentic leadership. I do know you attended it with me. So what did you make of it as well?
I was thinking the fact that he highlighted that we should be teachable as leaders. We should always learn from them. You know, the people that we are leading, we should draw from their experience. And then a very, very favorite topic of mine was where our heart and our minds connect. And to me, that's something where, as a leader, if your heart and your mind with regards to leadership connects, and I've said that in one of the sessions before, it means that you have that clear vision. So you know what you want to do as a leader, and you do it because your words and your actions align. That was so precious to me. He says, as a leader, we should, if we make mistakes, accept them. And I think we also had that with Prof. Belfort today when he said, if something didn't work, go to your team and say, it didn't work, let's try something else. That was so refreshing.
Most definitely. If you attended any of the sessions from yesterday until today, please do provide us with any feedback, provide us with any comments or your biggest highlights throughout the sessions. I think going back to Prof. Mauser's presentation on authentic leadership, he did mention the importance of ethical foundation when it comes to true leadership, and that is, I think, one of the things. Today we are celebrating Africa Day, and when you are to reflect on the leadership on the continent, I think it's one of those things that you actually look at, and one of the things that each country or you read out a lot from the press about the type of leaders that we have. There's a lot of ethical misconducts. There's a lot of embezzlement of funds and everything. So I think that for me was really special. And you do mention, of course, Prof. Balfour's presentation, which was today, and that was really amazing. Because when you think about change, I think what most people rush to think about is technology and how do we use technology, but he really went to the foundations of where do we begin when it comes to the issue of leading change and managing change.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he also mentioned, as leaders, we must be disciplined. And I think we forget that, because if we are disciplined, it ciphers through to the people that we lead. I think sometimes we get so involved with programs and think that we want to reach that goal, that sometimes we lose some of the discipline along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then, of course, we had a communication and team building session by Maya. She presented an outstanding presentation. I really hope she can be in a position to share her slides with us, because I think she really prepared for it. And I think that is also one thing we should marvel at and also appreciate the guest speakers. All of them, they were so prepared to present. They showed that it meant something for them to present to us as well. So I think it's also worth mentioning that they did great job on preparing the presentation.
All of them. I'm looking through all my notes, because as we were in the sessions, I told myself I'm going to make notes, because I know I want to go back to those notes and apply these these factors in my own leadership style. Interesting point. 5 ways was mentioned that people respond to change. Now we are in the COVID and we've learned that we need to be adaptable, but we know, April, that you know as well, people aren't always adaptable. So they don't always like change. So the 5 ways of people, how they respond to change was listed as being committed, supportive, undecided, unaware, and opposed. And the one that stood out for me was those people that oppose the change. What effect do you think do they have on our leadership? If we get a little bit of opposition, does it make us better problem solvers? Does it help us grow? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think when we speak about change as well, we often think change always means that positive energy all around. And I think that's where we really fail as leaders or as the society as well. Sometimes when we speak change, we always want to hear positive things, but sometimes we need to anticipate the negative, a part or rather consequences that comes with change. And it's perfectly normal to have a situation where people are not comfortable with change. Sometimes change is not a welcome concept, not necessarily because we don't like change, but sometimes because it gets us out of our comfort zones. So that alone, because of that fear of the known, fear of, okay, if we accept this change, what's going to happen? Am I going to be secure? Because I believe it's in our inherent characteristics to want to be stable.
Yes.
Be it in relationships, be it in jobs, be it in any setup, we want everything to be stable. So change brings that unknown factor. And yeah, I think it was a brilliant presentation on change management.
Definitely. I'm thinking of Carice as you were speaking. She put self-awareness, she put integrity, empathy, genuineness, and humility into self-awareness. How lovely was that? To explain to us, if we understand it ourselves as leaders, we will understand other people better. That was so lovely, that continuum of authenticity. What is your take on the self-awareness aspect that came to light?
I was stunned by all the presentations, because every presenter, every guest speaker mentioned something to do with self-mastery, something to do with self-awareness. And I kept on thinking, is this a session? Is it a leadership workshop on self-mastery? But I ended up realizing that everything starts with the self. Everything starts with the self. If you want to understand diversity, being inclusive, it starts with you. How are you inclusive in nature, back at home, back in your household, in your own space, in your residences, in your own studies? How many people do you bring into your study to talk about your journey, about what you want to achieve with your study or with your career? So everything starts itself. Communication and team building. How do you communicate to yourself after a setback, after you struggled something, after you've achieved something? So everything, I realized that everything starts at self-awareness, at self-mastery. So it was really amazing. It was really
fantastic, fantastic. So indirectly, we can say the success of your leadership starts and ends with you.
Most
what
definitely.
Are you willing to put in? I'm thinking of session 4. I'm thinking of session 4 when this the speaker said mentorship is like sitting on someone else's shoulders. Do you remember when they said it's like sitting on someone else's shoulders? And I wrote here, as leaders, we build on the foundations of the leaders that we learned from. What is your take on that?
That is very true. I think that is why every time when you're a leader or when you're an academic, people always ask you, who's your role model or who's your mentor in that space, in a leadership space? Who do you think? What do you say about your own leadership philosophy or your mantra? in life, your mantra in academia, your mantra in leadership. I think it's because we're trying to see where exactly are you modeling your leadership characteristics, or the way of your decision process on leadership as well. So I believe that it is important. It is important for us to have role models. I know we are used to just saying, well, my role model is this guy because maybe he's rich or he's got lots of cars and houses and property. But it forces us to really look into personal traits, you know, when we're choosing role models and mentors in any space. So yeah.
Absolutely. Mary also said when she was speaking about networking, and you mentioned our role models, I mean, our role models are the people we want to connect with. And she said networking is your net worth. And that was very interesting, because in the times that we live, the networking that we do is extremely important.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I mean, since this is let me say, the last of the formal sessions that we're going to have, with tomorrow's session at 10 o'clock being the students' experience and opinion session, I think it is good for me to just say, from the organizing team, how we've managed to put all these speakers together is through LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
And how many times do you hear people advising each other that have a LinkedIn account, have a professional account,
yes,
set up a nice profile, even on Facebook, have a decent profile, Twitter, you name them, all the social platforms, so that you can connect with other professionals, other like-minded individuals. Yonita, for me to reach out to some of the speakers on LinkedIn, I just searched keyword leadership.
Fantastic.
And they came out.
We're making we're making notes here.
That is what I did. I searched leadership on LinkedIn, and then your Prof. Mazwes, Caris Anderson, Maya, they came up on the results, and as well as when I searched also keywords like emotional intelligence, and then people like Andrew also came up on the search results.
That was also a great session.
So it really shows the importance of networking, particularly now during the digital era. Yeah. It is very important to network. So I couldn't emphasize more on networking.
Fantastic. I've got some feedback here from Natasha Maharaj, who's also joined us in all the sessions. She says, I don't always like change. I do it as it is necessary, but not always a fan. And she also says every presenter thus far has mentioned the importance of authenticity and healing from past trauma. I think it's so important, and that is a valid point, Natasha. And Abril, we've heard about the trauma and how, if we do not deal with it, how it affects our leadership. What is your opinion on dealing with past trauma, having the courage to do so?
I'll say for me, it's been a very, very eventful 25 years. I'm 25, and I'll be turning 26 next month. Yay! And you know, as young adults, I would like to call myself a young adult. As young adults, we face a lot of things, be it in our own spaces, academia space, back at home, and we run away from facing the bad experiences. We always want to relive the positive, the amazing moments in life. And I've learned to deal with the bad moments. I've learned to really face them, because it holds you back in a way. I remember I would cry in my own space sometimes, because I haven't dealt with it. I haven't faced it head on. So if someone brings up the conversation, then it brings up those bad experiences or that bad moment, and then I'll then, you know, the mood changes. So up until a moment where I decided to be bold and be strong about it, and now I can actually share with people some of my experiences that are not that pleasant. I share with them in a way to help them also maybe learn and understand how sometimes life can throw things at you.
Yes.
And I don't cry anymore when I share, but that is a result of me facing and really addressing the past bad experience or negative experience. So I totally agree with what most of the speakers were highlighting about addressing past trauma or healing from past experiences. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you were speaking about pain, the pain that you experienced, that, you know, the trauma, I was thinking of Vanessa's session, and she said something very important. She said sometimes anger is necessary. And I agree with her, because we are not robots. We have emotions, we have feelings. And I love that clip that she played of The Office, because these are the things that really happen in the workplace and on campus. And I was thinking about a quote that someone told me one day. I don't know, it's an anonymous quote, but the person said that anger is pain that hasn't been dealt with. So as a leader, we are not perfect. I think that also shown through all the presentations. We are all human. We all make mistakes as leaders. Would you agree?
Yes, yes. Even in the very first session, and Caris mentioned it, a number of speakers mentioned that leadership is a journey.
Yes.
And I think where we sometimes we fall off as leaders, young leaders that are enthusiastic, you know, and passionate about wanting to see change, wanting to have an impact, is we want everything to be instant. We want positive energy all around. We want everything to be right in the moment. And we don't understand that, like Prof. Mazo indicated, there's a price to pay for being a leader.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
The price to pay might be a few mistakes here and there. But remember, this is all part of the journey. This is all part of you growing. You know, this is all part of building your character. So I totally agree.
Thinking about back to Beulah. Beulah rephrased leadership for us. She said, leadership, we all say leadership is the ability to lead. And then she said, her rendition of it is that leadership is the capacity to give direction. How beautiful is that?
Outstanding, amazing. And it all, again, I think, not to blow our own horn as the Mafikeng chapter, but I think how interconnected all these topics were.
Yes.
Because even in the authentic leadership conversation, we did mention that capacity makes you an authentic leader. You know,
absolutely.
So yes, we might talk about empathy, we might talk about self-awareness, but also capacity then comes into the equation too. And yes, you need to have capacity to lead. I think that's also one of the things that we overlook in the African continent, because maybe Obrio is good looking or Yonita is good looking. Let's have Yonita as the face of our campaign. Let's have Yonita as the face of our organization. But does Yonita or does Obrio have the capacity to be the face of the organization?
Very true.
So that is important. That is very important. So I couldn't agree more on that. That is very important. Capacity is very important.
Fantastic, fantastic. This morning we opened, was it Veli Ndaba?
Yes, Veli Ndaba.
Veli Ndaba spoke about preconceptions. He spoke about assumptions, behaviors, and results. And I was thinking, you know, our assumptions are sometimes things that we're not aware of. It's because of our worldview, how we grew up, what our view is of the world, how it works. And that sometimes we have behavior as leaders and we don't even realize what we are doing. And therefore we get the results. But I think the one thing I take from this leadership summit, Abril, is that it has really challenged all of the attendees and the panelists and the speakers to reevaluate the preconceptions we have about leadership in itself.
Yes. I think I'm also sitting here and I'm thinking of the notes I was making. I'm thinking of some of the things I wrote down that, you know what, I think I actually need to read more on this. I thought I had this under control. I thought I understood this. but I definitely need to go on and do some homework, read more on it. And there are actually other sessions that I still feel I'm going to wait for them to be uploaded and rewatch them and, you know, just contextualize the whole
Digest.
presentation. Because yeah, that's just how informative and how developmental it was for me.
You were also mentioned something that you mentioned that we spoke about the networking when Mary spoke about that being your net worth. So look how everything is connecting. Veli said you should be well versed in technology and you should be a great communicator. And if we are not on these social platforms, social media platforms, how will we learn how to use this technology? So it's absolutely true. It's like everything was woven together over the course of these 2 days.
Yes, and talking about communicating, Mary also mentioned something really important when she was speaking about how then do you reach out to people, you know. I know for a fact that I was using a generic message when I was reaching out to all the speakers. I was just introducing myself. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I'm Aubriel from Golden Key. We would like to have you as a guest speaker. But Mary indicated something important. Not everyone is fine with a hi. Not everyone is fine with a hello, you know.
I remember she said
So
we should say dear. I remember that, yes.
exactly. So it speaks to, you know, the art of communicating, and to fully understand the art of communicating, you need not to think you're a master at it. You need to continue reading, and that way you become dynamic in how you approach communication, because, you know, we are approaching, I mean, Mary's from Nigeria.
Yes.
Marjorie will be joining us now. She's currently connecting from
Wonderful.
Canada.
Wonderful.
And then Andrew is from Zimbabwe. And so we've got already a pool of different speakers from different countries coming together, and they might have a whole different way of communicating in their own cultures. So that is important before you just put out a generic message. So yeah, I think that was important what Mary highlighted, as well as Caris and Veli too.
Yes, yes, and Prof, and that actually kind of glues everything together for me now when Prof. Emmanuel mentioned inclusion. So in a sense, the summit has included the various renditions of what leadership is, which is beautiful because diversity is fantastic. It teaches us so much.
Yes, yes. Again, I won't be blowing our own horn as the Mafikeng chapter, but I'm only processing it now that you've mentioned it, because I'm thinking we've got, because we are in a university setup, we do have people from an academia space, and they were sharing their own experiences on leadership. And we have people that were coming in from a corporate space, from Vodacom, from Holland. And then we have people that specialize in just leadership. You know, that is just their area of expertise. And now your Andrews, your Veli, Prof. Mazwe, Maia, they were now coming in just to speak on what leadership is from their perspective when they're coaching teams and different organizations. So yeah, it does show the importance of inclusivity and diversity, but at the same time, it also emphasizes the need for us to have opinions from not only one space, but from multiple spaces.
Fantastic, fantastic. And that brings me to Prof. Balfour. He said leadership is not problem solving. Leadership is finding purpose. What a golden nugget.
Absolutely brilliant. We can actually create a quote on that and
Yes.
Post it everywhere on social media.
I think that's a great idea.
because purpose, without purpose, then I love this example that one of the pastors I listened to loved using as an example. He loves saying that if you don't know the purpose of a knife, then you're going to be using it for anything. And sometimes when you're using it for anything that is not meant for its purpose, then it's going to get blunt. you know, it's gonna get blunt. It's gonna seem as if it's a worthless accessory, you know. So it'll end up seeming as if leadership is just a populist contest in a way, if leadership is being used in the wrong way, if the platform to lead is being used in the wrong way. So I believe he is right by mentioning the word purpose. He's very, very right by the word purpose.
Absolutely. And purpose, like we said earlier, and there's so many things that amalgamate. I mean, I'm going to be thinking in so many directions. I'm sure all the attendees as well. This was just so inspiring. Intrapersonal skills. The intrapersonal skills that were mentioned, visualization, positive affirmations. Again, we start with ourselves. And I have great news for everyone that's attending. Gabriel, it seems like Marjorie is logging on. If you
Hi, everyone. Awesome. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Marjorie. Welcome.
Are you guys doing well?
We are doing well. Thank you. Thank you so much. And
it's a pleasure. Apologies. Sorry about the time mix-up. I'd not realized until a short while ago that it had shifted a full hour and I had some other engagements.
It's all right. It's all right. So yeah, thank you, Yonita. It was great chatting with you. We've just been doing a reflection on the past 2 days on what we've been getting from the different speakers. And the main emphasis was on self-mastery, self-awareness. That's where you have to start in terms of authentic leadership. We have already introduced you. We've already read out your bio. So the attendees are waiting to hear what you have to share with us about leading during a pandemic. The session will also be available on the Golden Key Academy portal, as well as the Golden Key Southern African YouTube page. So if there's anyone who would like to watch it later on or at some point, maybe starting from next week, they can access it there. So let me not waste much time, and over to you, Marjorie.
Fantastic. So thank you, everyone, for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be with you, albeit virtually. So I'm talking about leadership during a pandemic, and I really would like us to be interactive. So if anyone would like me to pause at any point, just let me know. I know that we were originally scheduled for an hour, and I'm not the best at listening to my own voice for that long. So you'll be pleased to hear that I'll talk for about maybe 25 minutes, and then we can interact further. So I'll share a little bit about my personal story and some of my leadership adventures, just to give you some context about this topic of leadership. Currently, I am a non-executive director, so a board member for insurance companies in South Africa and in Nigeria. And I'm also a leadership coach, and that's what I do for most of my time. And the reality is that I play a number of roles, including being an author, a speaker, and also a superb aunt to 11 nephews and nieces. I also love learning languages, and I'm in the process of learning my 5th language, which is Spanish. So I've always enjoyed working with people, and nowadays I'm working with people to bring to life their self-awakening. So I'm really immersed in the realm of self-leadership. As a child, I wasn't particularly conscious of my own inclination to lead. I was quite a quiet child in primary school, and I was a lot more confident as a teenager and became a prefect in high school. And then I discovered that I had a desire for social change and somehow became the junior deputy mayor of the city of Harare. So I served on the junior city council and really enjoyed that way of interacting with the community and fundraising for the less privileged. And when I reflect on it, I realize that I've always been a proactive self-leader. So as a youth, I had many moments of protest. I was really not a fan of history in my early teens, and I could not see the point of memorizing information. So I lobbied my father and I asked him if I could drop the subject. And in his version of the story, I forged his signature to make this happen. And my version is different, of course. But neither he nor the school would have any of this. They were not interested in me dropping the subject. And then I recall that a couple of years later, when I was in sixth form, I decided that I was going to do French, maths, and physics for my A-levels. So in those times, it was very typical to do 3 A-level subjects to leave school. But in my household, I may as well have said that I was going to join the army. It did not go down well. In my household, you did pure sciences, and that was the only acceptable thing. So I quickly added chemistry to this mix, but I was too defiant to drop French. So I ended up doing 4 subjects, which really, in retrospect, was a little crazy. So my parents were pretty determined that all of their children would follow professions. And because I was good at maths, I was inclined towards STEM careers. And my parents, as I mentioned, wouldn't have it any other way. They really thought that sciences were the way forward. If I wanted a career in the arts or linguistics, for example, with my passion for languages, that really was out of the question. Which is a great irony, considering that both my father and I later became translators for the British government many years later. So when I was 17, I took part in a maths Olympiad, which was sponsored by Old Mutual. And that's when I first heard about the actuarial profession. And apparently there were only 5 actuaries in Zimbabwe at the time. And the grown-ups spoke of this career with such reverence. They said it was impossible to complete the exams. And I said to myself, that's really what I want to do. That sounds like my challenge. So I got accepted to study actuarial science at the London School of Economics. And honestly, I had no idea back then how great that was. So 4 days after my last A-level exam, I packed my bags and moved to the UK. And 6 months into this adventure, the Zimbabwean economy was in turmoil. And my fees were doubling every day as the currency went into free fall. And the long story short is that I had to leave university if my parents had any chance of funding my siblings. I am one of 6 children, and I'm third in line to the throne. So that was quite a challenge for my parents to keep up with. We had huge disagreements about this because I was basically telling them that they couldn't help me. And for people who'd held solid education and high esteem, this really was a problem. So they thought, here she goes again, she's just being her defiant self. But eventually time revealed that that was actually the best thing that I could have done. So I took a job with Deloitte in London, and I started working as a tax associate. I started studying towards tax exams, which I passed. And to cut another long story short, I eventually moved internally and qualified as an actuary without going back to my undergraduate studies. And then a few years after that, I went to business school to study, guess what? Leadership and strategy. So in the workplace, I was really driven to lead in terms of managing teams, and I really thrived on that experience. It was something that I actively pursued in my career. And in my last executive role, I was the chief strategist for the Liberty Group, serving on the group executive committee of the company. And in my role before that, I had responsibility for a number of functions in 13 countries for the Old Mutual Group. In my volunteer roles, I was also naturally inclined towards roles with responsibility. And so, of course, it was a huge honor for me to become the president of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK. This was a profession that I'd grown up in, and I'd seen older, mostly male, virtually all male, and all white professionals achieve that role. I didn't believe that it was possible. And this was something that typically happened at the end of one's career. So in 160 years of the institution's history, there had not been somebody under 40 years of age becoming president. There had never been a person of color, and indeed, there'd never been somebody based outside the UK. I was the 3rd woman in all of those years. So I was already living in South Africa at the time, and the idea that I would acquire this position was actually so far from my imagination, but it happened. And that said, it was one of the toughest positions I've ever held, and it taught me many leadership lessons. So I'm grateful for that experience. So before I talk specifically about leadership in a pandemic, I hope you can appreciate from my story that leadership has many guises. I've led myself into being a rounded professional. I've led my profession. I've had leadership roles in my community and indeed in my family. And I've also led in an organizational sense. So I'm mostly going to focus on leading in an organization, as I think that might be most helpful to you. So leading in a pandemic, this is a topic that is all too familiar nowadays. And I want to talk about 3 qualities that I believe have been and continue to contribute to successful leadership during these times. The one thing that stood out to me in this pandemic is the need to appreciate circumstances that people are experiencing. And for me, compassion is critical here. Compassion is about having concern for others. It's the quality that's demonstrated when leaders create strong bonds between people. It's a quality of having positive intentions and having real concern for others. When we're able to be compassionate, we reveal our humanness. We're able to improve collaboration, we can raise levels of trust, and we can enhance loyalty. So it might sound counterintuitive, but having compassion creates a perception of a strong rather than a weak leader. Now, compassion doesn't mean that if someone is experiencing hardship, that they are let off the hook and they're not accountable for all of the expectations that one has of them. It means that there is some understanding extended to them in terms of what they're experiencing. It means that there can be some kind of open dialogue about charting a way forward that takes into account their circumstances. So it's the difference between working somewhere where it's okay to say, I'm caring for a loved one who's unwell at the moment, and could I have a conversation about managing some of my deadlines? Could we negotiate in order for me to accommodate this caring job that I have in my time? Versus not being able to speak about your personal circumstances in the office or in the workplace because they might count against you somehow. So Harvard Business Review talks about this concept called wise compassion. And they say that leaders operating in this mode are balancing concern for their people with the need to move their organizations forward in an efficient, productive manner. And when tough action is needed, they get it done with genuine caring for people's feelings and well-being. And so how does one get there? Well, having compassion for others starts with having compassion for ourselves. How can we expect to understand others if we're unable to appreciate what's happening in our own lives? So it becomes a foreign concept if we are not practicing it for ourselves. That means we need to be kinder to ourselves. How often is it that we go around criticizing ourselves for what we could have done better, and yet we hardly ever congratulate ourselves for the things that we do particularly well? To do this, you need to be really conscious and really mindful of self-talk, and to keep that narrative that's constantly running through your mind, encouraging and lifting. How often do you listen to that little voice in your head? For many people, not that often, actually. And if you're one of those people, then what a golden opportunity for you to tune in to the voice that guides you through each day. Just to listen carefully to its tone and to fine-tune it so that you're sharing uplifting messages with yourself at all times, that you're kind and fair to yourself, so that you're well practiced in that art and you can offer that kindness to others. And by the way, that voice in your head matters more than you might give it credit. So I encourage you to really master it and ensure that it is building you and others up rather than tearing you down. So the next quality is around vulnerability. And I'm really inspired by Brené Brown, who's a sociologist, and she's written several books about why vulnerability is such an important part of being successful, both in personal and organizational contexts. So she talks about having the courage to be vulnerable. Now, again, it might seem counterintuitive that vulnerability is an attractive leadership quality, but here's why. All of us, doesn't matter who we are, presidents, leaders, children, parents, we all struggle with something. And somewhere along the line, we've told ourselves that the best way forward is not to share where we feel less than our best. When we do that, however, we reveal our humanity and we're able to build a level of trust with others. So the more that leaders can bring this into their practice, the more that they inspire others to do it, So vulnerability could be, for example, saying, I'm not good at writing reports and I need help with that. Or it could be admitting to a personal struggle and needing to take time out of work. Or it could be admitting to a mistake in an open and a timely fashion. So I did a recent exercise seeking feedback from people that I'd worked with from over the years. And nearly 60 people responded to my call for input. I received such a wealth of feedback. I was really quite overwhelmed. And so I can share with you one of those points of feedback is that sometimes I'm perceived as being too direct. And that while my personality is warm and compassionate, sometimes how I communicate doesn't bring that across. So I need to bring more of this warmth and more of this compassion to some of the interactions that I have in the workplace. So many of you have probably never heard of me before today, and you assume that I am an accomplished leader with a perfect track record and without any development areas. And that's not true. Leaders are people. You and I are leaders in our own ways. And believe me, we all have something we can work on. So it's a case of being aware of what those areas are and being open to feedback, and then having the determination to bridge those gaps. So thirdly, I want to talk about adaptability. We are living through very uncertain times. Things are changing rapidly, and they were already moving fairly rapidly without the onset of a pandemic. Now, how many of us would have thought that we would be here experiencing a global shutdown in the 21st century? How many of us thought that more than a year after the pandemic was declared, we would still be wearing masks and practicing social distancing? Or that global travel would be highly regulated, so much more, it seems, than the post-9/11 measures. Many businesses have taken a serious knock as a result of both local and international impacts of the coronavirus. And in order to remain operational and relevant and to meet their goals, many organizations have had to change their ways of working, and some of them literally overnight. So doing this effectively has meant that organizations have had to adapt and implement solutions rapidly. Those who have remained ahead of the game haven't done so accidentally. So what is it that they've gotten right? That quality for me is adaptability. They've had the ability to re-kit the organization, having established what is changing in their context and exploring ways to navigate those changes. In many organizations, this is evident in the culture. So for example, are people encouraged to learn? Are they encouraged to speak up within the organization, to say what they're observing and how they can make changes there? Are they encouraged to keep their eyes and ears trained for developments that are external to the organization? Does the organization embrace new ways of doing things, or does it stifle innovation with a "we've always done it this way" attitude? So a critical ingredient that lies at the core of adaptability is the desire for continuous learning. And this is something that leaders need to display in order for it to permeate throughout the organization. So it might look like discussions in team meetings, which allow time for reflection on how the landscape has shifted. It might be formalized learning about tools which will carry the organization through tough times. It might be actively revisiting strategies and team priorities to reflect that what is being done continues to be relevant or otherwise. So whatever the case is, it is not about standing still and hoping that the crisis will pass with the organization unscathed. And at the heart of that kind of culture lies adaptability. So for this last segment, I want to explore how we personally, how each one of us takes on the responsibility of leadership in a pandemic or otherwise. No doubt we should all be thinking about how we can be more compassionate, more vulnerable, and more adaptable leaders. But I want us to go further than that and consider some other qualities that not only make us better leaders, but they also make us better friends, better partners, better parents, better sons and daughters, and better members of our communities. So the first is around authenticity. Put simply, this is about being yourself. To do this, you need to know yourself. What do you stand for? What causes are meaningful to you? How do you want to treat others and be treated? What are your values? So speaking from my own experience, I enjoy environments where I can express myself freely. I'm quite a playful character, so I enjoy cultures where having a little lightheartedness is welcome, where we can laugh while we're working. We're working hard, but we're still enjoying ourselves. I really value fairness and I value honesty. So I struggle in places where things are done in the dark, or where what is said to me is not what is said when I'm not there. So when we lead with our authenticity, we also invite others to do the same. We as leaders can model our behavior on being grounded in our true selves, and that becomes infectious and bears fruit. Others behave that way too. So the question for you is, what is authentically you that you bring into your interactions as a leader? The second area is about a term that I heard a few years ago, which is called being other-centric. So this is about recognizing that we are all connected as human beings. The lives we lead cannot be about our own agendas and our own needs. For example, when we litter on the street, we affect the environment of those in our communities. When we speak ill of others, we infect those around us with ill will. All that we do and all that we are is not about us. So how do we navigate life with this mindset? How does it look in practice? When we're talking with friends, we might be sitting there waiting for the perfect time to tell our funny joke or to tell our deep story, when instead we should be sitting back, listening intently, and offering support as needed. How could you possibly offer support if you're not trying to engage with what someone else is experiencing and you're just waiting with your pre-prepared response? When something happens, for example, a boss leaves or a colleague is unwell, that we don't think first about the consequences for us. What is the impact that this is going to have for me? But rather we think about, how are others affected by this situation? Why did the boss leave? Were they experiencing difficulty? What's happening in the colleague's life that they're unwell? How could we be of service to them? So here's how to get started. Do something kind for someone other than you every day. And ask yourself the question, what have I done today that has enriched the life of another? And ask yourself that question every day. So the third thing is really an important one, and that's about sharing your gifts with the world. You might have reflected on what your purpose on this earth is and struggled to answer that question. And my very simplistic answer says, it's about sharing your unique gifts and talents with the world. I'll tell you a story which touched me and which was told by an author called James Clear. He says that in 2007, John Maloof was working on a book about Chicago's Northwest neighborhoods. And on that particular day, he was hoping to find a few pictures from the 1960s that he could use in this book. But what he ended up finding was more interesting. After purchasing boxes full of negatives, and I hope you guys know what negatives are, to develop from a local auction house, Maloof began developing some of the images. And when they finished processing, he was stunned. They were incredible pictures, and there were tons of them. More than 30,000 in these boxes alone. And whoever had taken these pictures was surely one of the most prolific and talented American photographers of the last 100 years. And yet, when he looked up the photographer's name, he couldn't find her work anywhere else. In fact, after further searching, he was fairly certain that nobody had ever heard of this woman. Her obituary never even mentioned that she was a photographer. She was a mystery, an unknown artist with world-class talent. The images that were discovered by Maloof were taken by a woman named Vivian Mayer. And for nearly 40 years, Mayer had worked as a nanny for wealthy families in Chicago and New York. And during her many daily errands, her excursions with the family and children, her trips to other cities around the US, she took nearly 150,000 photos of the people and architecture that surrounded her. So her work and backstory fascinated Malouf that eventually, after processing thousands of images, he collected 100 of the best photos and posted them online. People loved them. Major newspapers called to run stories about Mea's work and wanted to know how Malouf had discovered these images. Filmmakers called and decided to make 2 documentaries about the story, including Finding Vivian Maier is one of them. Galleries began to exhibit her work throughout the US, Europe, and Asia. The uncovering of her images has been referred to as the greatest photographic discovery of the 21st century. So this story raises plenty of questions, not just about her past, but about her willingness to share her gifts with the world. Now, we will never know the reasons why she decided to hide her work away in boxes. Maybe she didn't feel that it was good enough, or maybe she wanted to share it, but didn't quite know how. But regardless of her own reasons, 2 things are certain. First, the world is a better place because she chose to create something. And second, that she shouldn't have waited, or shouldn't wait, and you certainly shouldn't wait, for somebody like John Malouf to share your work with the world. So Vivian's story is a wonderful reminder that we all carry some kind of brilliance inside us. And maybe it's a better reminder that we shouldn't be waiting for others to put our work into the world. How easy would it have been for Malouf to walk away from the boxes he'd found and for her work to be forgotten? And it makes us wonder how many other brilliant artists, creatives, scientists, and thinkers have their work hidden away. What are the talents that you have locked within you that you are hiding away? So whatever you choose to share with the world is going to determine your impact and your legacy. I had a great uncle whose legacy was identifying family members and sponsoring them through further education abroad so that they could in turn uplift their families. And my father was one of those beneficiaries. And in turn, I am an indirect benefactor of my great uncle's generosity. So sharing your gifts can take many, many different forms. And I bet that some of you are thinking, but my gifts aren't unique. Well, rest assured, they are. By virtue of your uniqueness, nobody in the world thinks like you or can imitate you. You 100% own the copyrights to the person that you are. So make your originality count. In my own life, my desire to become a coach and a writer stemmed from this sense of my own gifts and an appreciation for them that continues to grow. So with those words, I'm going to wrap up. I encourage you all to be the leaders that you wish to look up to. The mark of your leadership will be in what you do and less about what you say. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to some questions and discussion.
Amazing, amazing presentation. And just before you joined us, we were chatting about how all the speakers from day one, from the first presentation, were talking about self-mastery, being authentic, and being vulnerable. And as you were speaking and I was making notes, Yonita, as I was making notes now, and then I hear that word again, vulnerability, and I'm saying, oh my God, do we always have to be vulnerable? But,
Marjorie, you should see what we were talking about before you came online. Then you will understand how excited.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Well, we're all in sync. That's fantastic. I'm glad we're delivering consistent messages.
Yes, but thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I don't see any comments within the comment section as well as our Q&A session. But yeah, maybe Yonita and I can also just engage you a little bit before we let you go.
Sure.
But you mentioned something, and I was about to post it on my Twitter, but then I was on Instagram, then I got confused, then I decided to stop. You mentioned something. You said vulnerability is the key to success in an organizational setup or in a self setup, in a self context, you know, like your career. And I'm thinking, okay, that is something that is worth expanding on, because I'm working in a team. I'm fortunate to have been working in teams before. I'm currently working in a team right now with the Golden Key Mafikeng Chapter Executive. And one of the things we talked about earlier on as a team was that we need to know each other's vulnerabilities. That way we can complement each other. That way, when I know that Aubrey lacks in this way, I can then step in and support him. Absolutely. And then the team goals now can be achieved. So I don't know if you can expand more on vulnerability and particularly in a team setup. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the examples is exactly what you shared, that we will have different strengths and we can complement each other by identifying where we're less strong. So if I'm not as good at doing, I don't know, a verbal or in-person presentation, and I have a teammate who's really good at that, but I'm excellent at writing the presentation, then we can work with one another. But in order for us to figure that out, I have to be honest about where I feel my shortcomings are and willing to do something about that. I think the other aspects are that we often view leaders as being these strong and impermeable people who are unfazed by anything, and they carry on with life and take everything in their stride. And that's probably true for the most part, but leaders are human beings as well. You guys are leaders. So do you feel that you have everything figured out? I hope not. None of us do. And so being able to be open about that and say, look, guys, in the team context, I'm really having a personal struggle where it's straining my time. And I'm sorry, I'm not as on top of things as I'd like to be right now. Please bear with me. Do you mind helping me out in these ways so that I can get through this tough period in my life and the team can still thrive? It's difficult to say those things, but guess what it's going to do is create a stronger bond between you and your colleagues by being able to say, I'm not perfect. I'm struggling. I'm human. We all struggle, so we can identify with that sense, and you're going to build trust by being upfront in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Honesty about where you are as a team and reaching your goal. Prof. Balfour also said this afternoon that if something doesn't work as a leader, go to your team and say, well, this didn't work. Let's regroup and let's start over. Would you agree, Marjorie? Absolutely.
And you want the buy-in of your team, right? Firstly, you want to be able to recognize that your humility, this didn't work. This was what I thought was the best way forward, but it didn't work. So how do we gather together as a team and find a new solution? And we're going to be better for it because we've acknowledged the shortcomings of the previous thing that we tried. And we're all now saying we want to do better. We're all now on the same side. Now, if I fail to share that sense of, well, that didn't quite go as planned, you're going to have all kinds of ideas about me and my sense of awareness. You're going to have all kinds of ideas about me and my sense of pride. And I bet that those things are not going to be favorable for me. And then we're going to struggle to work together in future. Whereas if I can come and say, guys, I made a mistake. That was a poor judgment on my part. I think we can do better than this. How do we help me do this?
Would you agree that if we show our weaknesses, like many of the speakers have said, the presenters, that people would be more relatable, they would feel like they can relate to us, and they would feel like they can, try and achieve bigger goals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And trust does wonders. So what you're doing by admitting things that are helpful for the team to know is creating a sense of trust. And when you trust each other, you can work more collaboratively. You can share more. That means you're probably going to gel better than a team that is very closed off and secretive, and each person is working for themselves rather than trying to work for the collective good.
Brilliant. Awesome. I love that. So this has been amazing. I don't want to lie. The past 2 days, I know we still have another session tomorrow, but I think the more formal sessions, that had the guest speakers, our subject experts. It's ending this night. It's ending now with this session, and I would just love to express my deepest gratitude to you, Marjorie, for coming in and sharing with us and saying yes to our invitations, as well as the other speakers that also agreed to be part of this. I think it's important for young leaders and for young adults to continue having these conversations on how is true leadership defined, what characteristics, what elements should we look into when it comes to true leadership. So thank you so much again. A big thank you to Golden Key Southern Africa, of course, for coordinating this. You've been with us since the first day yesterday. And I believe we'll still be together for tomorrow's session as well at 10 o'clock with the student leaders, because we want also to hear what the students have to say about their own experiences on leadership. I think it's important when you have a program for students to have the student voice as well. So we're going to hear from them. Do tune in tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central African time. I don't know, Marjorie, if you'll be able to join that.
No, it's a bit early for me. I'm currently in Canada, so it's going to be 2 a.m. my time. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be too much of us to ask you to be up at 2 a.m. But we'll definitely have that session recorded and shared again.
Yes.
But yeah, any last words that you'd like to leave us with, Marjorie, before we let you go and close off the session?
Just to stand in your power